but yet we find time to get out for a safe walk, drive, a run, or a play out there. And isn't that such a good feeling after all? So Natalia, Betsy, and I want to thank you again for joining us. And before I introduce our first reader, I'd like to remind everyone to please mute yourselves and take down your questions in the chat if you like, or on a notepad somewhere that you want to ask the authors later, because we're going to have a Q&A, and Natalia will lead that off after the final reading. So let's begin. I'm excited. Yes. Our first reader of the evening is poet Donna Vorreyer. I hope I said that correctly. Donna is the author of 3 books: To Everything There Is, Every Love Story is an Apocalypse Story, and A House of Many Windows, all from Sundress Press. She lives in the suburbs of Chicago, where she serves as an associate editor for Rhino Poetry and hosts the new monthly online reading series, 100 Pictures of Honey. You can learn more about Donna at her website, donnavorreyer.com. And I can put that in the chat if you want. Let me see, I'll do that right now. There you go. Everyone, please help me welcome Donna.
Thank you, Ignatius, for that lovely introduction. I'm so excited to be here. I've enjoyed attending readings in the past, and to be a part of it with all these wonderful readers is wonderful. I said wonderful twice. I'm very excited. I'm going to read a few poems from my latest collection, To Everything There Is, and then I'm also going to read a few new poems and then make way for the other people we have reading tonight. This book is both an elegy for my parents and a celebration of the kind of love that buoys you through times of crisis and loss. So I'll share a few of those poems with you tonight. The first poem is called After Observing the Mummy with My Students at the Museum. One says that his skin glows. Another that he looks peaceful. Amber-hued and desiccated, he seems to me indifferent, his narrative resolved. He lies surrounded by scarabs, their brilliance auspicious, more to my liking, the way their jeweled but green and lapis backs hint at reed and river, the earth that tethered him, the sky that his gods occupied. We move on through the mammals, and I think it is no phenomenon to ritualize death. The wake for my own father just weeks ago, a somber sort of party, adorned with photographs and flowers, until grief stomped in like a wayward moose, terrifying in its stature, but wielding tenderness in its eyes. We arrive at the dinosaur remains, the reconstructed bones majestic, scaffolded with bolt and steel. We learn to tell carnivore from herbivore by the teeth, which bones lingered in pits of tar, how the creatures thrived, but could not abide change. One student asks the docent about the size of their hearts, and I don't hear the answer, as my own beats loud, primordial, being petrified lately, my body performing in hypothalamic motion, first to care for, then to bury both parents within 5 months, their lives too entwined to survive one without the other. There was a holiness to their faces in those last days, gaunt and drawn, yet knowing, much like the mummy. I wander back to study his face. Peaceful is right, I decide. The deliberate fold of his hands across his chest, the scarabs shimmering, singing, remembered, remembered. Thank you. So that poem was for my dad, now one for my mom. I inherit the whims of my mother as I prepare to trash this draft. I discover a piece of stationery bordered with red gold leaves. In the center, her cramped hand reads simply, "The snow is so, so white today." How odd to read these words in June. The air hung with humidity, sweat jeweling my lip. Just that one line, stuck in an old calendar, underneath a stack of books. I upend each one, fanning the pages to search for more, and out they flutter like doves, each one scribbled like urgent messages from a simpler beyond. That red bird is back, crashing into the window. Railroad tracks are the saddest things. The wood is pretty where it's rotting. If I could revise our lives, make her survive the cancer that burned fast and bright through her insides, I would tell her how wrong she was, to say she couldn't write, how much I am like her, with my mundane notes, my daydreaming, Post-its congregating in each bag, notebooks on each surface, and I would sit with her and notice every moment, rebuke her for thinking she was not good enough, a mistake I still make, one that I'm making right now, as I question and regret each line I add to this poem. I want to talk to her. I want to tell her that the cardinal is back, flying straight at the window, again and again. Thank you. And like I said, these are obviously, lost poems, but what helps you through a loss is you can't get through a loss without love. And so there are also love poems in the book. I have a very wonderful husband of almost 38 years now. And I don't think I would have made it through that whole experience without him. So a couple of love poems. I'll read the title poem from the book, and then a few new poems. This one's called The Opposite of Amnesia. Tonight, the wind is a frenzy of gulls, a broken vow, and grief makes a dry docked promise of sailing. I say I do not want this cross, even while I smelt the nails, choose the boards, eye the edges straight. A wave overtakes, drenching my materials. This weight, I reside with it. This breached bow, I try to repair with patience and handiwork. I deftly string 1,000 shells before they tumble and leave me weeping on the pier. I have been nothing but brine and iron for weeks, and yet you remain stalwart while I struggle to return. I avoid the mirror, and we search for omens on the beach, sigh and dive together into a surf of tangled sheets. Another love poem, which is a golden shovel poem of a lyric from a song called Terrible Love by The National, one of my favorite bands. So, Ebb Tide. The first blood rush of breath and it's morning again. The insistent and terrible light throws patterns on the bed. Love, it's time to wake, leave this comfort and re-enter the world. One more touch and I'm up, stepping over dog toys, walking with the hitch and stutter of age, with the familiar tingle of nerves that spiders its way down my arm into my hand. It's a feeling as consistent as the sunrise. A pill makes it better, a hot shower, terrible news blares from the radio. All I love, both at hand and at risk. I know that you are stirring now upstairs, that I'm safe, and I'm oh so lucky walking out the door each morning wrapped in the armor of our certainty. The sky, it darkens, fickle and remote. It takes itself so seriously. Yet here we are, an anomaly, unchanging as the wide ocean, which is to say, moving all the time, but not apart, never apart. And I will never need to fear our waves. I know just how they break. Thank you. I'm going to read then the title poem from the book, which the To Everything There Is obviously a familiar beginning of a proverb, right? Or some people know the biblical verse better from the Birds song. So I mean, it was an apt title for the book, I think, because that is everything, there's a cycle, of living and dying that is everything there is. And that's whether you're a person or an animal or a plant. And so this is the title poem from the book, and the title serves as the first line of the poem as well. To everything, there is a season of entrails, carcasses flattened unnatural on the tarmac in varying stages of rot that tilt the dog's nose toward the desperate wreckage. Yards and gardens draw the fallen from the nearby preserve with its drought-drained lake, the frogs' dried to parchment silhouettes, the snakeskins coiled to survey their own innards. Worst is the young doe, dismembered and strewn on both sides of the lane divider, tempted by sweet leaves of hosta or bitter stalks of tomato. I don't know why I said worst, as if the other creatures deserved their deaths, but the deer have often jeweled my mornings with stillness, soft eyes, quick and muscled limbs, given me a bit of peace in those first moments at the window. So it seems worse, and my nurturing bones ache to see that baby's head severed from its torso. The reptiles are never removed. Their skins turn to leaf or paper, crumbling and dispersed by wind. Small mammals lie long enough to become pungent. So I must not be the only one troubled by this, because the fawn is gone by the time I drive back home, her body scraped from the pavement by someone who loved her white spotted flank and her lush eyelashes. This is what I tell myself, though I am well aware of reality, because I need to believe that someone will transport the wreck of me to rest with tenderness, that I will be remembered as something beautiful. I'm going to just read a couple of new poems to end. I've been writing a lot about aging, and kind of about my changing role. I've retired recently, so I'm no longer really a teacher, and that role has changed. My son is 29 years old, so it's not the same as being the mom to a young child. And so as those roles change, those are things that I'm kind of exploring in my work. So I'm going to read three poems. Let me know if I'm going too long, and I can, make that too. The first one is called Bloodline. 1. I wanted there to be a rivering, a signal. I wanted the clench and bother, the stain and solder of it, a desire to fit into that sisterhood. I wanted it. Desire, the clench and solder, rivering, the stain and signal, the wanting, a fit and a bother. 2. Each month there was a river, signaling clench, clot and bother, stain and stench, a doubling pain I did not want, the pain of belonging, doubling the clench and signal, river, the stench and clot, the wanting, a bother of belonging. 3. I wanted to be a river, gathering stones, signals to shape in my current and birth smooth and new onto a shore. I wanted to be both river and shore, gathering the stone and current, shape the new and smooth, the wanting, a signal for shore. 4. Each month there was a river, signaling failure, clot and carnage, loss and empty, the breaking of biology's promise of a second heart. Failure, the clot in biology, carnage, the heart and signal, the wanting and empty promise. 5. I was tired of the river, all its tributaries, signals of nothing, flow and fallow, useless current, more nuisance than nurture. I wanted to be landlocked, flow the useless nuisance, fallow the landlocked nothing, the wanting, a signal of nurture. 6. I wanted to be something else, the river dry, a signal of endings, drought and flaking, sweat and shiver, a new shore for this salvage. I salvage a self unrivered. There's two more short poems, and then I can't wait to hear the rest of our readers. This one's called Fragments Approaching 60. The body, a mitten full of bees, a drawer of angry brooches, the glass half empty, and I emptied it. A message in a bottle that says, you must change your attitude. Oh world, we are both so broken. Maple pods helicopter down in autumn air. I strip away the parchment to reveal a smooth green seed beneath, a promise. I want to be peeled back like this. How veined and fragile I am beneath my coat. Thank you so much for having me. I'm going to read one more poem, which is kind of about that changing role of motherhood as you get older. And then, again, very grateful to be here and can't wait to hear our other readers. This is a new poem called Boundaries. A squeal rises from the garden. A rabbit caught on the wire fence while seeking a cluster of sweet greens. The soft church of her body trembling as she turns her legs to wrench them free. She escapes as I approach, leaves behind a clump of downy coat. Her cry was like a child's, piercing my core, reminding me that I still dwell in the country of mothers. Though my son has aged beyond its borders, this country demands allegiance. His need in crisis comes now in code, through texts and screens, a panic different from the frantic breath of the rabbit, but just as urgent. It leaves behind its own remnants of struggle, its own worries. The next day, the rabbit is back beneath the pole beans, nose twitching, head crowned with pale flowers. She crosses the yard with no visible damage. The phone in my pocket rings, and my heart leaps its fences. This is my country. Of thee I sing. Thank you.
Donna, thank you so much. I mean, we're so lucky to have you tonight. My God, those are beautiful, beautiful poems. And each one was so strong. As you continued reading, I kept on thinking, well, this can't be as strong as the last one. And it was. And they were also different. I mean, the two poems about your parents were just so compelling and moving. But like this poem about the rabbit too, and how you kind of weave in that being a mother is you never stop being a mother, and how the comparison between your son's texts to the rabbits, screaming, everything was just beautiful. So thank you. And I'm going to also plug your reading series because I was there last week. It was excellent, excellent. So with that, now we're moving on to Jeremy Wilson. Very glad to have him with us. Jeremy has read with us once or twice before, and it's always a treat. So I will now tell you about Jeremy. For those of you who don't know, Jeremy T. Wilson is the author of the short story collection Adult Teeth, published by Tortoise Books. He is a former winner of the Chicago Tribune's Nelson Algren Award for short fiction and has been named one of 30 writers to watch by the Guild Literary Complex. His work has appeared in the Carolina Quarterly, the Florida Review, Hobart, the Masters Review, Sonora Review, Third Coast, and the Best Small Fictions 2020 and other publications. He teaches creative writing at the Chicago High School for the Arts. Let's give a warm welcome to Jeremy Wilson.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me? Is everything good? Sound good? All right. I'm going to actually start off reading a poem. But first, I want to thank Ignatius and Natalia and Betsy for having me back again. This is a little different than last time because, as you mentioned, there was football going on and we had to stop. Like, everybody had to stop because like the crowd was like cheering. So it was kind of cool because the crowd was cheering and you could pretend it was for you, but it was also kind of disruptive. So this is a little better. It's a little more calm. But so thanks for coming. I'm going to read a poem. I don't usually write poems. The only reason I ever write a poem is to try to get my wife to laugh. And so she's listening, I think. She's out there listening. So I'm going to read this poem. So I teach creative writing to ninth graders. And one of the things that I always try to get them to, I encourage them to write about things that they love. And hopefully by encouraging them to write about things that they love, they get to share that love a little bit. So I was pleased to hear Donna writing about music. It's something that I really love. And so I encourage them to write about what they love, and they often write about music. So the poem that I'm going to read is about a guy who probably has, it's arguable, but he has one of the greatest voices in music history. And this is called What a Fool Believes. Michael McDonald is God of yacht rock, which means he will answer our prayers with shrimp cocktail and salted rims. And he is always there for us when we need him, but sometimes requires an interpreter. If I ever get a boat, I will name her Sweet Freedom. If we don't pay attention, he will leave us like the thing you told me you needed from Target. I knew I should have written it down. The happiest days in a man's life are when he buys a boat and when he sells a boat, which sounds a lot like a joke a suburban dad might tell about his ex-wife while on his boat listening to Michael McDonald. If we could catalog the times he's helped us with his smooth grooves, it would be our gospel, the book of Doobie. And here I am in this Target, trying to remember what it is I keep forgetting. And here he is singing What a Fool Believes when suddenly there's a scented candle and some White Claw in my cart. But that's not what you wanted. Was it sunscreen? And then there was the time we got a couples massage in a cabana outside of Cabo, and I was uncomfortable with a strange woman oiling up my back. But then I heard his voice by the pool singing minute by minute, and I relaxed under the hot rocks. That was a good trip. We spent 3 days in a treehouse, and it was cool. So you stole a throw off the bed and wore it as a shawl and drank mezcal until your thumbs were numb. Well, I still think mezcal tastes like burnt basketball shoes. I have a regular suburban dad game where most weeks somebody ends up hurt and every week another complains about his ex-wife. In the end, we all sit around drinking beer and eating pizza and listening to music. When I sprained my ankle, I kept a bag of ice on it and stayed too late because there's pleasure in company, despite how much it hurt. And there he was again, Michael McDonald, easing my pain with a heavy dose of Yamo Be There. He is the ice in the cooler, the umbrella in the drink, the sunset over the water, and I pray to him that I will remember what it is you need from this Target before I leave. Okay, so hopefully everybody knows who Michael McDonald is, but if you don't, you might want to check out this YouTube clip that I'm putting in the chat later. Don't watch it right now because, it'll be a little distracting because you won't pay attention to me. You'll be paying attention to the Doobie Brothers. So, all right, so now I'm going to read a piece of short fiction. And this one is called, Lessie. Delia's mother finally agreed to get rid of her collection of ceramic mammies only after she saw the movie, The Help. She told Delia she understood now why they might possibly come across as offensive to some people. She'd lied. When her mother was dying of pancreatic cancer, Delia found a ceramic toothpick holder in the door of the fridge, shadowed by ancient bottles of salad dressing and pepper sauce. The toothpick holder looked just like all the others: the cookie jar, the teapot, the spoon rest, the salt and pepper shakers, identical except for the minor differences that fit their function. A red kerchief knotted atop their heads, round, dark faces, bright, white eyes, wide grins, a fat red dress covering an ample bosom, hands on sizable hips, and a starched white apron flowing to chunky shoes. Her mother had named them all, which somehow made an awful thing even worse. She called the toothpick holder Lessie. Delia picked up the toothpick holder, ready to smash it on the kitchen tile, when her brother called her back to the bedroom and they watched their mother die. Delia was a hospice nurse, so was used to this, and even though it was her own mother, she approached the passing with a detached professionalism. She thought about curling the toothpick holder into her mother's hand as the men from the funeral home quietly took her body, but she didn't want to give her the satisfaction of being buried with this thing she was incapable of throwing away. Delia wrapped the toothpick holder in some dirty socks and put it in her suitcase and took it home with her when she left Georgia 2 days after the funeral. Back at work, Delia developed a habit of checking her patients' refrigerators, curious about those things they might have told their own daughters they were getting rid of, but held onto for God knows why. Mr. Sasaki kept a collection of Japanese coins in a small mason jar tucked in the corner of an empty vegetable drawer. Delia took them out and pressed the cold metal to her temples, imagining she might one day go to Japan and spend this man's money on sushi, circulating his coins back into the system where they'd lose their chill. Delia found a swatch of fabric from a baby blanket inside Mrs. Tierney's fridge, an ivory-handled butter knife at Mr. Seshek's, a snow globe of downtown Philadelphia at Mrs. Smith's, a Tupperware full of watermelon seeds at Mrs. Longenbach's, the shifter knob to a 1978 Trans Am at Mr. Sherman's, what she thought was a human finger but turned out to be a fake inside a butter dish at Mr. Crandall's, and golf balls nestled inside an egg carton, each one of them dated with a black Sharpie at Mr. Dickman's. And the items she found that were small enough to take, Delia took. She kept them all in a shoebox, along with her mother's toothpick holder. She didn't know why she stole these things from people. It wasn't so she could remember her patients or tally the numbers she'd helped usher to the other side. She felt like she deserved their things, or maybe like she was helping them unburden this part of themselves they'd kept buried in the cold. She told herself it wasn't even stealing, which is also what she told the hospice facility when they fired her for stealing. Delia had a friend who urged her to move out to LA and start over. She found a sunny one-bedroom apartment scented with jasmine that always seemed to be in bloom. When Delia was unpacking, she opened the shoebox and went through all the objects. Junk now, a box of dead people's junk. Why had she brought this crap with her? She couldn't even remember all the patients who the objects belonged to, but she did remember her mother. She missed her. She dumped everything in the trash except for Lessie, whom the giddy perfume of jasmine now rendered laughable. Out here, Delia would not become a person who hid her secrets in the refrigerator. She was from the South. This had been her mother's. She would own it. So she put Leslie on the windowsill above the kitchen sink and filled the hole in her back with toothpicks like a quiver. And every time Delia washed her hands or rinsed off dishes, she saw Leslie smiling and thought of her mother without shame. Delia got a new job, made new friends, started a relationship with a man named Carl. He noticed the toothpick holder in her windowsill and asked her where she got such a thing and why she had it and why she kept it on display when it was so obviously racist and all their friends could see it at this very dinner party. They're Black friends. She knew she couldn't answer the way that he wanted. She told him he had a fleck of pepper in his teeth. Carl broke up with her. Her rent went up. The jasmine stopped blooming. One day, she came home and the toothpick holder wasn't on the windowsill anymore. Delia would convince herself she'd finally summoned the strength to get rid of it, that she knew no matter how it kindled memories of her mother, that it was unjustifiable, that it was mean and ugly and hateful. She would even call Carl and tell him she'd smashed the toothpick holder with a righteous hammer. But she knew the truth. She knew Leslie had finally had enough of waiting around for people to do the right thing and had simply walked away, her hollow body armed with tiny arrows. That's it. Thanks.
Wow, Jeremy, that was just awesome. Thanks so much for giving us your poetry. I thought that was really wonderful too, and really enjoyable. And your fiction, of course, is absolutely stellar. So thanks for sharing that with us. I also wanted to just, say that when I was growing up in India, one of the first bands that I had heard was the Doobie Brothers on the Voice of America. If any of you remember the Voice of America, it's a radio station that I don't think you get in the US. You have to be outside the US to listen to any broadcast from the United States. And I think it lasts for a couple of hours in the morning. And I remember listening to the Doobie Brothers and wondering, why do they call themselves the Doobie Brothers? What's the meaning of that? I never understood it. So I think it brings back a lot of memories. Thanks for that. It was really wonderful. Really enjoyed it, and thanks for being here. I want to introduce our third guest. We're so pleased about this. Zachary Scholenberger is a poet, translator, and short story writer working in and among Yiddish, English, and Hebrew. His work has appeared in poetry, Words Without Borders, Body, and elsewhere. His translation of the Yiddish prose poetry of Avram Sutzkever was published in 2020. By day, Zachary is a mild-mannered physician living in Baltimore and can be found on Twitter at Dr. Zachary Berger. Please welcome Zachary Scholenberger.
Thank you so much. Donna and Jeremy, really two tough acts to follow. I have to say, I do not have a boat, nor have I bought or sold a boat, but it's been snowing in Baltimore, so I have worn some boots. So that's really as close as I'm going to get. You've just learned two things about me, that my day job is as a doctor and I like different languages. So you'll hear a couple of poems from both realms. The first poem is called My Patient Texts Me. My patient texts me. I'm scared. I grab my phone and breathe. Too many short of breath this week. Her kid's crying. She's doing okay. I'll shore up a bit her frayed heart, her congested chest. I'm only worried, only bowed down by this world without spoilers, making its own mazes of what transpires. The next poem is a miniature, and the poems I'm reading and the translations are all still uncollected at this point. I'm just trying them out, so thank you for your indulgence. This next poem is a miniature. It's in Yiddish and in English translation, so I'm going to read the Yiddish first, and then the English. Ibrige der Tag, Wird es a koish was kennisch halten, was man darf. Mele die Sekundes fallen rois, bleibt man bei der Regel zero. Me hört wie des Harts Beschluss, sie so klappen. Day is overturned and becomes a basket which you can't use to hold anything. So seconds drop out. What's left is moment zero. You can hear your heart deciding whether to beat. The next is a poem in Hebrew and English. I'm going to read the English version first, and then the Hebrew. It's called The Silence of Darkness. The silence of darkness awakens doubt and caresses sun's well-lit frights. Last night, that's what I thought. But tonight, like a stone, the stars concentrate, forgetting worries, everyone, at the difference between evil and good. Dumia shel choshech. Dumia shel choshech morer et safek v'shikech hayasurim ha'muvarim shel shemesh. Kach chashavti emesh. Aval halayla mitrakez b'kochavim kein asela. Shocheach al kol tzara v'et hahevdel ben tov lava. I think it's important for me to recognize that when I write in these other languages, I'm not writing in any languages that I was born with. So all of them have come to me where I've worked to acquire in adolescence or adulthood. And there's something, the Yiddish word is chutzpahdik. There's something of an unmitigated gall about that. And I recognize that some of you might be native speakers of some of these languages, and I think appropriation is a necessarily difficult and awkward concept, so I plead guilty to that. The next poem is in Spanish, and one of the reasons that I write or try to write in Spanish is because I take care of Spanish-speaking patients, as well as with working with Spanish-speaking colleagues. And although, as I said, I'm not a native Spanish speaker, I feel the need to participate in a Spanish-speaking culture in a way that is not as hierarchical as medicine is. This is called, and it's going to be without a translation, excuse me. It's called En cada sugerencia. En cada sugerencia hay un futuro prometido, pero ¿dónde y quién tiene el reloj? Relojes ya no hay, solo móviles, zumbiendo, pajaritos huérfanos. I'm going to conclude with some translations. Actually, the very last poem will be my own, but I am currently occupied in doing a lot of translation, mostly from Yiddish. And one of the poems I'm translating is, you heard about the poet Avram Sutzkever, who died in 2010, was a poet originally from Vilnius, which is called Vilna in Lithuania, and then emigrated to Israel. He wrote a canto of 10 poems called Ode to the Dove, which is about a child's meeting with a dove who confers upon him a mission to rescue a lost civilization and with it be sort of a prophet. So I'm going to read two of these sonnets, roughly speaking, from this 10-part canto. First is Ode to the Dove 7. Both, I'm just going to read the English. World, what's the world? Just her melodies, wavish, forested, worldly, keening her godly melody into my veins. Be lordly. I snuff out the keening in seas, unknown cities, then greet me. Wait, in a rain of tercets, we're playfully doused by Dante. Master of hell, perhaps you would like to exchange hells. I will stroll in your fires, while in theirs you'll reciprocally stroll. It will not diminish your eternal marmoreal glory. You are still Alighieri, and your hell still allegory. People, where are the people? The dust is to be envied. Only in the words of someone one finds their belief, their spirit. Cemetery echoes, who hears them? For me, though, they are a lodging. Wait, how Levi sang out lion-like, out of Spain, my longing. You poets, hey, without you, this life is spent napping. Would have long ago dropped to its knees before death like a camel. Human and beast would be tortured, lonely in pain. My dove wouldn't be with me faithfully on her flute through all lands. And besides Dante, who most of you probably know, the other poet referred to is Yehuda Halevi, the Spanish Jewish Hebrew queer poet centuries ago. I'm going to read, the next translation I'm going to read is another poem in this cycle, Ode to the Dove, number 8. Dancer, tell me, where are you? My hair senses your flutter. The dove can't give me an answer. Where is your home? Where's your theater? Your eyes bring me this once a doe in sunshine's dew. Where is the tremble in gardens with blossom Chagallien blue? Who's breathing me in like a rainbow near the forest that's rain-drenched? Who is the naked wave, so flexible because so boneless? Who is that snow avalanche aglow over rock face abyss? She buries in garlands an eagle wishing for her breasts a kiss. Who is the mirror in tears? Who are the faces, those new ones? In the coffin, who is that woman? The funeral covered with roses. The wheels keep turning and turning, devouring and binding my shadow. A shovel buried itself in a grave full of dirt just today. Who is the white transformation which cannot emerge from the birch? Who is the echo of silence and who is the silence in blush? No one at all will answer me. Are insanities burning inside me? Just today, stones did stone themselves in the street. Going to end with 2 poems. And one of it is a translation, and the last is going to be my poem. I want to talk a very little bit about this poet who I'm also translating. Her name was Bela Schechter-Gottesman. She died in it's such a horrible thing not to remember the deaths of people, the death years of people you love. Hopefully I'm not the only one that happens to, but I think it was 2017. She was one of the first poets when I lived in New York for a while. She lived in the Bronx and is known in Yiddish and klezmer circles as a songwriter, but she was also a poet. Published 5 books of poetry. This is a book of, I'm going to show an image of a picture of hers, I think. We have, yeah, this is her. This is a portrait of Bela Schechter-Gottesman. This book of hers, Footpaths Amid Stone Walls, was published 50 years ago. And it's in Yiddish. But she was one of the first people I knew who was a poet. Like, that was what she did. And when I was a young adult. So she was an important example to me. So this poem I'm going to read first in Yiddish. And it's called Calm. And I'll read the English translation. Was a Ruhe is es? Is es die Ruhe von Verstehen, was legt sich auf Mäul und Gesten, wenn du wärst klug? Sie ist es die Ruhe von Vergehen, was esst sich ein in Mark und Bein, wenn du wärst alt? Sie ist noch Zeit, sich aufzustellen und losen sich in Weg, was plötzlich Chlor oder so sagt man. Sie ist schon Zeit zu verklingen mit dem Wiederkohl. Zu spät? Calm. Is it the calm of understanding, which lays itself in mouth and gestures when you get smart? Or is it the calm of demise, devouring in marrow and bone when you get old? Is it time to get up and get underway, which suddenly is seen so clear? Is it time now to let the echo reverberate? Too late? That's a poem of Bela Schechter-Gottesman's. Who I think, maybe it's not too much to say that Donna's poetry reminded me of her poetry. Donna should live and be well. The last poem I'm going to read is mine. And I thank you for your attention. And this poem is called The Way to Work. And I wrote it before pandemic, but it really, I think we all reevaluate what we write all the time, right? In the light of these transformations. The way to work. I get into the shuttle and it has other people in it, glancing off each other on their way to the last stop. We pass a statue of a hero and students waiting for us, carrying cellos and laughing. Passersby overtake us. When we disembark, some people go my direction, while others turn left. I might see them again. Thank you very much.
Zach, that was just amazing. Those poems were amazing, and I want to. I'm so happy that you read in Yiddish, because I don't know Yiddish, but what a beautiful language, and I could tell that there are these its beats and its sounds seem to be so made for poetry. And so I was so glad that you did that. And I saw comments where other people were saying, yes, thank you for doing that. But your poems are also beautiful. And so happy that you're here with us. So thank you for that. And I was going to say, it's the silver lining maybe of the pandemic is that, we never would have known your poetry or heard it anyway from you. And neither would everyone who's here tonight. So it's a very nice, thick silver lining. And thank you so much. And it just feels like the night is going so fast. And I'm about to introduce our last reader, who is Dipika Mukherjee. So Dipika moved to Chicago from Shanghai in 2012 and spends a lot of time at the neighborhood Harold Washington Public Library. She is the author of the novels Shambhala Junction and Ode to Broken Things, and the story collection Rules of Desire. Her writing is included in the Best Small Fictions 2019 and appears in World Literature Today, Asia Literary Review, Del Sol Review, Chicago Quarterly Review, Newsweek, Los Angeles Review of Books, Hemispheres, and Orion. She teaches at Story Studio Chicago and at the Graham School at the University of Chicago. And I'm just going to add, it's not in her bio, but she's a wonderful person. And so happy to have her with us tonight. She's a great reader, everything. So thank you, Dipika, and let's take it away.
Thank you so much, everyone. And Natalia, thank you for that wonderful introduction. Everyone can hear me, right? Everything's good? Yes? Okay. All right. That was just such an amazing lineup of readers that I am quite intimidated, but I'm just going to just jump right in and take you to Malaysia. I think some of you came a little later than the others, and we were just talking about how hard it's been in COVID to kind of lose the art of traveling, the joy of being in different places. So I've been writing a lot about travel articles, and I've just had a book accepted of travel essays, essentially. So this is from that, and I'm going to take you into Malaysia. Just a couple of explanations. I think the rest of it is pretty self-explanatory, even though I may use words that are not English. In Malaysia, you don't have Uber drivers. They're called Grab, G-R-A-B. So it's called Grab drivers. And Rimbun Dahan, which is the title of my piece, Rimbun literally means jungle. And I was in the middle of a jungle for about 5 weeks in tropical Malaysia. So this piece is titled Rimbun Dahan. Are you sure you're not a serial killer? The Grab driver is joking, of course. He's driving me back to my cottage, Rumah Balai, set within the dense foliage of Rimbun Dahan, where I am the writer in residence for 5 weeks. I have come from my home in Chicago to work on my novel in rural Malaysia, where part of the novel is set. Tonight is a cloudy night, and the solar lights along the way are completely dark. There is no illumination at all. Our cottages are not air-conditioned. Water is recirculated. Everyone is encouraged to create compost for the herb gardens, for the food we consume. But even the eco-warrior in me understands how driving on an untarred road by the light of car headlights can make grown men a little nervous. During this ride from Kuala Lumpur, we have discovered that he has the same last name as a deceased journalist married to my distant uncle in the Bengali community. It now ceases to astonish me that no matter where in the world I am, the enormous Klang Valley operates as a village, and a link to community can always be found. We feel like family already and have spent the journey discussing the Grab driver's 16-year-old daughter who wants to study creative writing at the Nottingham campus. He worries she will never make money from writing. He is actively dissuading her from her dreams. I have been mentoring Malaysian writers for over 2 decades, and I know the sad realities of the profession personally. I have said nothing in her defense. But suddenly, like a glowing white mirage, Rumah Balai is framed in his headlights. Rumah Uda Manap and Rumah Penang, the 2 other historical buildings, lovingly restored to their former glory, tower like monuments in the darkness. The headlights catch the glints of the flowering trellis in the frosted window panes as the light of the moon starts to shine dimly through the clouds. "Wow," says the driver. "You live here?" I nod. "How much is the cost, huh?" I tell him I have been awarded a residency and it costs me nothing. I open my front door while he waits. His eyes are still open in wonder when he asks if he can see inside. Much later, I'll think how stupid it is to invite an unknown male inside, no matter how many acquaintances we have in common. I am still a woman alone. But as the lights from the antique lamp holders flood the house, I just open the door wider and invite him in. The intricately carved 4-poster bed with the princess mosquito net, the Chinese cupboard with the frolicking phoenixes, the picturesque kitchen with the enamel mugs, he takes it all in. I had a Russian passenger once who told me that in Russia, writers are treated like royalty, he says. He gives me a megawatt grin before he turns to leave. I think my daughter should become a writer. I stand on the balcony, grinning happily, as much for me as for his daughter, as the red backlights are swallowed into the forest again. One of the many lizards, chichaks, sound tick, tick, tick over my head. In Bengali, it is saying truth, truth, truth. Rimbun Dahan is the home of the architect Hijaz Kasturi and his wife Angela, and is set on 14 acres, about a half-hour drive from Kuala Lumpur. It is a world of international artists and dancers and painters and sculptors and poets and writers, all developing traditional and contemporary art forms. There are multiple artist studios, a dance studio, an air-conditioned artist lounge, and a library with very spotty internet. There is a remarkable underground art gallery. We are free to forage in the extensive herb garden for aloe vera and curry leaves. In a corner of the herb garden, I find the plant the Malays know as sepeno. Not only do the applied leaves reduce swelling, but the plant is also used to fend off ghosts, the Pontianaks and Hantus, from entering your home. Unfortunately, nothing fends off the mosquitoes, not even the industrial strength repellent we all have on hand as we sit by the poolside during the orientation, where I meet the other residents for the first time, Ruth, Ayim, Sharifa, about 4 days into my residency. We all slap ourselves periodically. Angela Hijaz looks at my bare legs and smiles. I have the same indulgent look on my face when Pan, our Belgian Greek horticultural intern, shows up on his first day in shorts. We learn rather quickly that the organic stuff is useless against the mosquitoes, and it's the industrial strength DEET level things that we really require. During the past 4 days, I've tried to figure out the slithery night noises as I awaken from sleep. I've swept up reptile droppings from kitchen cabinets and floors, and I've learned to close my windows so that the resident monkey patriarch won't perch on my windowsill, feasting on insects and eyeing me until I charge at it with my umbrella like some demented Mary Poppins. Ajim, a Malaysian artist, grew up in rustic surroundings, and Rimbundahan, he tells us casually, does not faze him at all. The Indonesian artist, Ruth, speaks with affection about the large monitor lizards by the pool, which look like mini dinosaurs. Then Nadira, also D, tells us the story of a family of bats invading her room in the evening, heading straight for the electric fan and lying wounded and bleeding on her floor. D called the caretaker weeping. I take a swig of my gin and tonic. This is going to be a long 5 weeks ahead. D at 25 is the youngest in the group, but insists on walking with me back to Rumah Balai. I, the newbie, have ventured out without a torch or a phone light and planned a trudge in the dark. She and Ajim both walk me back so that no one walks alone. This is the best part of a residency, the bonds that grow and last through the years, because we all create things from the figments of our imagination, things of beauty and courage and conviction, which may or may not reach other people. And what we do is so inexplicable to the more pragmatic. With dry leaves rustling under our feet, Dee asks hesitantly whether she can introduce me to her boyfriend, a social activist and writer who is familiar with my work. As always, this takes me by surprise. In no other country, especially not in the US where I now live, do I have such name recognition. It is delicious to hand a credit card for payment at a bookshop in Petaling Jaya and have the cashier gush about a short story. And once a young fan actually did a little jig of joy before taking selfies. I feel such a close connection to the writing community in Malaysia that although I understand why writers want to be published and known in English-speaking countries, that is certainly where the money is, if at all. I also hope they speak to the communities they write for. Frequently, in my hometown, Chicago, I wonder whether I'm the lone diversity and inclusion author in an otherwise homogeneous panel. The imposter syndrome is real for every writer I know, but it has softer edges and a tactile embrace, at least for me in Malaysia. 2 weeks pass by. I wake up to yoga mornings on a balcony shimmering with sunlight sieved through trees. There is the golden glint of spider webs, each day a new thread or one broken, the pattern renewing. The sapling that I anchor my tree pose on starts sprouting pinkish red shoots at the base as well as on the branch edges. Kuala Lumpur is still choked with a haze, but here the mornings are fresh and the evenings cleansed by rain. I get into a pattern of writing through the nights, eating at the Warung Selera across the street, and occasional forays into town. Rimbundahan is surrounded by a Malay community, traditional in their dressing, and I see no one who looks like me for days. There is a soft, gentle rhythm to our days, and the dogs come and sun themselves nearby. I learned to differentiate between the sharp swing of a monkey and the ponderous passage of a monitor lizard. I grew used to the bolt of the striated chichak resident beside the carved fuse box. I stopped looking for movements. under my pillow at night. The words come. I publish an article in the newspaper, have another short story accepted. Shorter pieces flow, but my novel feels like wrestling a crocodile. Just when I have quietened the fangs, the tail rears up and disables my flow. This is my third novel, so I know better than to despair. I am patient in the cyclical rhythms of Rimbun Dahan. I buy a radio because it's too quiet. I tell friends I'm writing a Malaysian dystopia by plagiarizing the news bulletins. Being so close to Kuala Lumpur is both exciting and distracting. I read a Bengali poem by Malika Sengupta at Lit Books for World Poetry Day. The event is organized by Pusaka, and Pauline Fan invites 14 poets to an evening of poetry in 11 languages: Malay, English, Bengali, Mandarin, Arabic, Persian, German, French, Spanish, Malayalam, and Russian, all with translations into English. There is the launch for The Principal Girl, Feminist Tales from Southeast Asia, a collection of necessary stories from Malaysia and beyond. Commonwealth Writers hosts a panel on the legacy of indenture in contemporary times. It is a thought-provoking panel about erasures and interpretations. Dee and I go to a talk hosted by Sisters in Islam about Muslims and the media. The Q&A session is engaged and electric, sometimes bordering on the seditious in this country. Malaysia is exciting for artists for precisely this reason. There are real problems to open dialogues about, and the magic realists and the fabulous and the fantasists are coming up with ways to express the forbidden. Dee and Malaysian artists like her give me hope for a new Malaysia. She's an entrepreneur with her own company, but is also engaged in social activism. At Rimbun Dahan, she's an artist creating a series of exquisite botanic prints to honor our shared ecological legacy. The Grab drivers all know the legendary architect of Malaysia, Hijaz Kasturi, but they talk a lot more about Bilqis, his daughter. In 2015, Bilqis dropped protest yellow balloons containing the words democracy, free media, and justice into a function attended by the former Prime Minister Datuk Seri Najib Tun Razak. Datuk Najib's political party was in power for 60 years, but was unseated in the Malaysian elections of 2018, and he's now being tried for corruption, including money laundering involving Hollywood celebrities like Leonardo DiCaprio. So the Grab driver tells me, she's a hero, you know, like that Tiananmen Square, that fellow that stood in front of the tank. He sees my disbelief in the rear view mirror. Okay la, maybe not on the same scale, but you know what I mean. We all talk only, but she did something. I finally meet Bilqis when she pulls up to Rimbun Dahan in an unapologetically bright yellow car. We chat briefly about dance and writing and Rimbun Dahan. I will leave this art sanctuary in a few days, but I feel assured that the legacy of Rimbun Dahan will live on for years to come, allowing many more artists to create and affect our communities in many subtle ways. This place will continue feeding the soul of this nation. There is a new gamelan troupe that is setting up their equipment now. The two master craftsmen from Bali tap at the instruments to tune them, while the group from KL watches and learns. Tap, tap. A bird chirrups in response. The melody melts into the breeze. Okay, my essay ends there, but I actually, took out parts of it because it would be too long to read in the time slot. And if you're interested in reading the entire thing, it is quite easily available online. So thank you for listening.
Dipika, thank you for shortening your essay, but honestly, it was never too long. I mean, I didn't really want it to end, and it was about so much more than Malaysia. I mean, it was about art and creativity and the obstacles to it. It was about courage, and it was about nature, and it was about assimilation in terms of just the way that you sort of eventually get used to a really different environment. And there was just it was so beautifully written. And I just was moved by it throughout. So thank you so much for being here and sharing with us. It's just beautiful what you wrote. And I want to say, Donna, Jeremy, Zach, thank you all for being here with us tonight. I've just learned so much and, hadn't expected to. And I want to also thank with great sincerity everyone who is here with us. And I always am a little embarrassed about saying this, but we would not be here without you. And really, it's almost like we're a conduit, between writers and other writers and passionate readers and students. And so it's just so nice that we're all together tonight. So thank you. And for those of you who would like to stay on for a Q&A, please stay on. They're always a lot of fun. And we can start it now. So basically, it's your chance to ask any of the four writers any questions you might have about their work, or, about what motivates them to write, or, their feelings on poetry today, whatever you like. So go for it. And so I'm going to change my view, actually, so I can see everyone.
Yeah, thanks everybody for joining us, and great evening, lovely readings, and
yes,
just really excellent voices.
I actually have a question, and I might be rude for me to start, but I was wondering, Zachary, how does being a doctor inform your poetry, your writing, or does it?
So I think that's a good question. I think for many years, not explicitly, but I did keep